Greetings. Welcome back to the Cape Lead Revolution. This is Chachi, and it's been it's been a hot minute since I posted the YouTube channel here, but this time I'm coming back with a specific purpose, a little bit off the cuff, for something kind of exciting that I'm getting ready to do. Today it's kind of mid-April 2025, and starting 1 May, I start my doctoral candidacy to become a Doctor of Business Administration with an emphasis in organizational leadership. My whole life, school wasn't the thing for me. Even now, on so many levels, I have no desire to be a doctor whatsoever. That being said, my past, distinctly 13 years of studying one word has kind of put me on this path. But realistically, I've had this path since high school. For all the things that I want to do, I wanted to put this out here. Number one, I wanted to get some of my thoughts together about how I understand this concept right here, right now. And then as I go through this program and hopefully end up with my doctorate, I want to see how this concept evolves, what I'm able to prove or disprove or put together. And realistically, hoping to give you, the viewer, an opportunity to kind of chime in to see if you've thought about some of these things and what this all means as we study and dive into the wonderful world of expectations. We'll get into that more here in a little bit, but the understanding, the thought process, the communication mechanism, and everything that is expectations has really dominated my life. Realistically, since high school, when I started thinking about just psychology, that was one of the classes I loved. I loved hearing about how the human mind worked and what made people uniquely them. And that translated into my understanding of love and leadership inside a military context, about how we lead the warriors of today, or for me, what ended up becoming the warriors of the global war on terror. I retired 6 years ago, coming up on 6 years ago, in the summer of 2019. And in my 6 years of retirement, I've continued to refine my thought process, and I wanted to kind of put some stuff together right here that hopefully is kind of my underlying thoughts about what I have done, what I want to do with expectations, and what I want to bring to the world. And hopefully, right, and this could be ridiculously ignorant, but hopefully, this turns into some form of Pacheco's theory of expectations. So, starting off, going back to my high school days where I was not a great student, lack of immaturity, lack of focus. I was one of those guys where that type of learning just did not appeal to me. That being said, I was reasonably okay, when it came to smarts. And with the most minimal of effort, I was able to get C's and B's, and that's absolutely fine. But what I found is the classes that I really liked, I really excelled in. One of those being psychology, and one of my teachers, Mr. Jimmy Evans, was crazy man, but he had such great energy. He had such great love of teaching and such great love of psychology that it was kind of almost impossible for me not to kind of fall in love with either him or the process. And so I'd always kind of studied that. And then I graduated high school, and I knew I was too immature to go to college. And so I joined the military. My freshman year is when Desert Storm happened, and what people call the first Gulf War. And I remember being glued to the TV that morning, listening and watching CNN and seeing the sortie count. I couldn't tell you what a sortie was, but I was counting it every morning. And so I'd always in the back of my mind, like, well, the Air Force, that could be a thing. And I'm not from a military family whatsoever. Like my uncle, I didn't see him a whole lot. He was retired Army. He flew helicopters. I love that on this, the birth of what the formalized special operations arena became back in the early 80s. But I wasn't around him that much, or in any way would that make him a significant influence on me in my life at the time. And then my senior year is when, Black Hawk Down happened. And I remember watching that on TV, not even knowing where Mogadishu or Somalia was, or, the difference between really Delta Force or Rangers, or that we even had airmen over there, as far as that goes, by the way of pararescue and combat controllers. Coming to find out there were TACPs on the ground there as well. So that was really odd, but I joined the military and instantly, carried on my love of studying and trying to understand the human endeavor. And so that was kind of cool for me, that I didn't realize that it would help birth me into the leadership stuff. But even when I got to my first assignment at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, some of my bosses, like I knew that some of them sucked, but I didn't have the vernacular. I couldn't articulate why. And come to find out later, a concept that I deal with now, I'd gotten great feedback one time. It's like, hey, don't, I was complaining about something. And my boss said, Chachi, that's very interesting. And then he dropped it. And he was like, Chachi, he goes, I don't have time for interesting. I have time for compelling. What can you tell me that's going to compel me to take an action? So that was kind of nice, And so my growth, even as a young airman in the mid to late '90s, being in the Air Force, I was always studying my bosses. Not that I kind of knew it at the time, but I was just watching what I liked, what I didn't like, and how that played out. Then I went to my first formalized leadership course in the Air Force. It's called Airman Leadership School, and just really loved it. And I had a horrible boss at the time. And I remember going through there as I just want to learn as much as I can so I don't end up like this guy. And so that, ended up being my most successful time in professional military education. But I hated how I had a negatively skewed lens to go through that course, right? I'm a huge believer in trying seeing everything with positivity. And so it was just really odd that was the most successful thing. But both with Airman Leadership School and then Non-Commissioned Officer Academy, where I went in 2006. Those were amazing, formative, fundamental times in my life where the instructors just spoke to my soul and showed me, what true leadership looks like, and just taught me the fundamentals and the applications and everything that went into it. Just put me on this path that I am today, that I don't think I would be here without them. So, at the time it was Staff Sergeant Robin O'Bannon and then Master Sergeant Rochelle Woodruff Kelso, who really put me on that path, who really helped out. But an odd thing happened between the time that I went to Airman Leadership School and NCO Academy, and it was the global war on terror. And what had happened was obviously the Twin Towers, obviously the Pentagon in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, all that had happened. And then right after 9/11, a few months later, even I went to Korea for a year. So I missed the invasion of Afghanistan. I did get the invasion of Iraq in the spring of 2003. And then coming back, like nearly my whole squadron deployed in 2003, and we came back, and then 2004 hit, and I developed. Some of my buddies had missed out on an opportunity to be recognized for their awesomeness. I felt during their time at war in 2003. And so I created a thing that I called the Pachesa 8. And I'm not sure if we're going to talk about it in this block right now. But it was my kind of my personified understanding of what the Air Force called the whole airman concept. It was, realistic. It says, be good at your job, help your local and military community, and develop yourself in some way. So they kind of talk about it in those terms, but I tried to formalize it in a way that made sense, which ended up being great. And this is coming off the heels of working for one of my favorite bosses, Master Sergeant retired Paul Ford. Now, Paul was super strict. He was with the Rangers for years and years, and he was relentless in his discipline. And for years and years, based on my time working for him, I said that professionals thrive on discipline, because his rules were there. They were set. You could count on them, and you had the freedom to operate inside the left and right limits, do whatever. But again, as long as you stayed within your limits, you stayed within, the disciplined nature of how we wage war. And then Paul, really loved him and still love him now in retirement. I didn't realize, but I had a bad understanding of that concept, because what I've learned now is that maybe it's not necessarily about discipline, but the expectations were always clear. And so, fast forward from 2004, when I started thinking about Paul and the creation of my Pachesa 8, to about 2012, I was deployed, and I was really struggling back at home station. Even in a deployed environment where we're just seeing that people weren't seeing the human side of leadership. They couldn't see the human being behind the uniform, and I was absolutely losing my shit. Like I just could not see how people were missing the humanity behind military service, and it was really, really odd. And I remember, for those of you who've been to Bagram Air Force Base, that the road, like Route Disney, that goes all around the flight line, a little over 8 miles. I remember I would try and run that every Saturday morning. And I was kind of running that, just kind of like doing some positive self-talk. Even before I knew positive self-talk was a thing. And I asked myself, and I just kept trying to get myself to calm down. I'm like, Tim, you know that they're not going to get it, and you keep expecting them to get it. and you keep setting yourself up for heartbreak, which is almost perfectly a Shakespeare quote. And then in a moment that changed my life, I asked myself, what is an expectation? And that changed everything for me. From there, I've started studying that word, and I've been studying that word every single day for going on the past 14 years. 14 years studying one word. It's been exhausting. It's been amazing, but it really took me forever because like studying that word, I look back and when you look in the dictionary, you don't get a good understanding for what an expectation is. In a generic sense, it's how we think something's going to happen, which is fine. But then you can bring up the concept of synonyms, where Pete Carroll had said this in his book, and this is one of those times where I'd come to the conclusion before I read his book. But I'm like, oh, then I read his book. I'm like, sweet, maybe I'm onto something, or at a bare minimum, I'm not way off my rocker here, because he had said like synonyms don't exist because if two words meant the same thing, it would just be one word. Words can mean generally the same thing, but their value or level of understanding about said concept or said word is going to vary. So I thought that was a very interesting point. So then I tried not to speak with synonyms. So then for me, it was time to define and differentiate terms. And so that was a huge thing for me, specifically for my career field in the Air Force as a tactical air control party, TACP, and certified JTAC, Joint Terminal Attack Controller. I called on airstrikes for Army units. And one of the coolest parts for that is we've got a publication, Joint Pub 1-02, and it's got like terms and phrases with distinct definitions and meaning that are used every single time without distortion. And it's absolutely amazing. And if you happen to have been in any environment, we'll just call it, if you're a project management professional, right? If you're PMP certified, like you've gone through the training, you know that there are distinct words and phrases and ways to communicate that facilitates everything. And we have this in so many different ways, and we do it in airstrikes. And that's what I learned. One of the concepts I'm working on is why an airstrike is the perfect conversation, because we know the bare minimum amount of information that needs to be passed in order to be successful. We can ask questions and seek clarification without it being confrontational, argumentative, things of that nature. But we speak with distinct words with 100% shared known meaning for these words for the best benefit of the net gain of utilization of that word. And we're able to do these airstrikes in the most austere of circumstances, the most harrowing of times, and get it right nearly every single time because we know what this communication mechanism is. So studying these words, defining the terms, putting that all together has been absolutely huge. And then in 2018, I decided to start my leadership development company. But it happened very organically because the more I studied expectations, I realized I started talking about perspective more. And that we can only be as patient as our level of perspective allows. And then it was really, hey, what do we know about our perspective? What shapes our perspective? And the more I kind of talked about perspective, the more I talked about alignment and whether, we were in line with our mission or what we needed to do. Do we allow for different perspectives? And then, moving forward, that is going to lead us to some form of expectation. And then I was sitting I was stationed in Kuwait at the time, and I was asking my buddy now, Chief Master Sergeant retired Scott Ransom. I was like, man, I was like, is it APE leadership for alignment, perspective, expectations? Do I need to add another letter? Like, is it teamwork? And we can tape it up: teamwork, alignment, perspective, expectations. And then Scott's like, Chacha, he's like, you know what that first letter is? You say it all the time. And I was lost. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, caring. He's like, he's like, you can't be a leader if you don't care, which is true. I've said that for years and years. And that's how Cape Lead began. That's how I started this company. And then that became not only a mindset, but a communication mechanism and a mentality and a modality for how we can take, the simple understandings and the construct of an airstrike and have the bare minimum amount of information, agreed upon and have successful conversations or interactions every time. And that's what Cape ended up being. But it built so organically in reverse that you can war game it as a planning consideration moving forward to figure out, what do we care about? How well are we aligned to achieve what we care about? What are the different perspectives at play? Which, by the way, I've also added priorities in people, so we can kind of get a trifecta on that. And then moving forward, what is the expectation? Not the hope, not the assumption, not the anticipation, but the expectation. And so, the more I started putting all this, and the more I started thinking I was studying leadership, I was really studying communication. So that's been very interesting for me. Is like, am I a leadership consultant? Perhaps. Am I a communication consultant? Probably even more so, as far as how we understand the dynamic, whether it's in person or digital communication, written communication, things of that nature. So that's been interesting to dive into. But then that also brought up the point of, you know, what are the fundamental skills that any leader needs? Or at a bare minimum, a leader in contemporary American slash world society. And I've kind of reconciled within myself that to me it's five things. Obviously, communication that I just talked about, but emotional intelligence, personalities, motivation, and then mindfulness. You need to have these basic skills. You need to have an understanding of these concepts in order to be an effective leader. Because when we talk about leadership or leadership consulting, what we're really talking about is good, like productive leadership consulting. Because you can be a leader, you can be a shitty leader. If you don't have a good framework for understanding these five pillars, as I call them, it's got to be huge. So putting the understanding of these five pillars together, with communication being one of them, but really emotional intelligence covers so much in here. The emotional intelligence aspect of understanding personalities, the emotional intelligence aspect of how we communicate, the emotional intelligence aspect of what we do to understand motivation and how motivation varies from person to person, but really even for that person, it varies from time to time on what may be impacting them in their lives, what's going on right there. So that in and of itself has been interesting. And then and then as I put all this together and I started focusing more on the communication side of things, as CAPE kind of evolved, going back to the point about words, without there being synonyms, in an airstrike sense, we have three different ways of saying I see it. And this isn't necessarily airstrikes. Pilots can use it for inter-air conversation as well. But realistically, we can say I see it three ways. We can say contact, visual, or tally. Contact means I see the specified reference point. Visual says I see the good guys, and tally means I see the bad guys. So if someone says, "Hey, I am tally," you automatically know that they're talking about target. That's a target reference. That's a word specifically referencing the target or target area. But if someone says, "Hey, I'm tally friendlies," I'm tally the good guys, that's just odd. That makes the hair on the back of my neck stands up, because that's an inappropriate and wrong use of that word and that phrase. Because we need to be visual friendlies, we need to be tally target. I really learned to focus on the words that we were using, and so the more I started focusing on the words we were using, the more that I got, put on this path, the more I realized that I really wanted to study this, the more that I realized I wanted to bring some of my studies and research to the world. And again, a lot of the reason why I'm making this video right now is I want to bring this to you because I hope that over half of you disagree with me. Because even if you disagree with me, we can have a great conversation about it. But I want this to be good, hopefully doctoral level leadership discussion, leadership thought on how this all comes together and how we understand and define these terms, because I really think it is important. So let's obviously we're going to talk about expectations, but before we get into defining expectations, let's talk about defining leadership. And this is one of the really fun things that I get to do when I go teach classes and consult on leadership topics, is asking the class, either we'll do a show of hands inside the room if it's small enough, or have people do anonymous text in, and I ask them, like, hey, what is your definition of leadership? And every definition that I get is always right. And it's always right for what it means to them, or what it means to them right now, or the situation that they're in, or the environment that they find themselves in. And it's always some generic form of the ability to motivate people towards a common goal, something like that, which is absolutely spot on. Other than there's a lot of great books. One of the ones I was doing for my master's had a great definition of where it's six different things, to include like an influence process, it's a belief, it's all these different things. And again, absolutely spot on. My studies and research have told me that trying to define leadership is about as insane as it is trying to define the feeling of love. Um, because I think the way that we get to the feeling of love and the way that we get to the feeling of leadership are pretty similar. You see, for me, like love is a byproduct. Love is a byproduct of a connection that I have with somebody. But in order to get that connection, I need to have successful interactions. In order to have successful interactions, I need to speak inside the construct of a meaningful communication mechanism. And that's how this went. If I talk about, the relationship with my wife, obviously she and I needed to speak inside a meaningful communication mechanism to where we spoke the same language, right? We had the same slang, the same understanding. Like it wasn't, cross generational type of phrasing, as far as that goes. But again, the more she and I spoke, the more that we had opportunity to have, better conversations. We had successful interactions. And the more that we're able to successfully interact, the better we're able to build a connection. And eventually that connection that I have led to this amazing byproduct that is love that I have for my wife. I liken leadership to that same process because it follows that same, for lack of a better term, order of operations. Because inside leadership, right, you need to speak inside the construct of a meaningful communication mechanism, and then you need to have successful interactions with somebody. And those successful interactions are going to lead to some form of connection that maybe we can hope to, inspire this feeling of leadership in the amazing men and women that we have the honor of leading. And the thing I like about this is, again, kind of asinine to try and define leadership if it's just an emotion. I wouldn't want people to try and define what love is, because love exists on many different levels. The love that I have for my children is a love that different from the love that I have for my wife, or different than the love that I have for my parents or my brother or my nieces or my nephews or my in-laws, my aunts, uncles, cousins, like all the different stuff, or my teammates, right? Or my fallen teammates, or my friends, or my pets, any of that stuff, like all loves, all different variants of love as far as that goes. So there's not just one definition that we would ever try and pin our hearts to. So why would we try and pin our brains, right, and our leadership heart to a weird definition as well? But understanding this order of operations, again, from successful communication mechanism to have successful interactions become connections become a byproduct, this amazing byproduct that we end up calling leadership. That order of operations, understanding that helps, where you can probably pinpoint now where you have some leaders who are probably doing the right things or maybe saying the right things, but it just feels hollow or empty, or it feels forced or disingenuous, or whoever you want to say that, because they haven't taken the time to follow that order of operations. They haven't spoken to you. They haven't had successful interactions. They haven't built a connection, and yet they're trying to impose their will of this feeling of leadership upon you when you know it's disingenuous to the entire relationship. But if we follow that order of operations, it becomes easy to see where people have failed, and then thus kind of re-emphasizing the point for us to follow, or to better them understand that order of operations for what it means for the people that we end up being around, and putting all that together. So that ends up being my definition of leadership, is that you don't define it. You understand it as a feeling that is a byproduct of a connection, which can only be formed through successful interactions, which can only happen inside the construct of a meaningful communication mechanism. Moving on from there is the definition of expectation. This I had thought about for years and years and years, and really didn't quite have anything there. I knew it was different. I knew it was more concrete of an understanding. When you think about synonyms, again, I hate synonyms. When you think about expectations or anticipations or assumptions or hope, those are all full words, again, that are some measure of what I think is going to happen. But again, words is important. That was my old boss, retired Colonel Steve Hodge, had told me that, and I just love that phrase. Words is important, and we need to speak with the correct words. But even in the BS that is the human communication dynamic, is that even in any conversation, I can only control 50% of it at best. So even if I'm purposeful with my words, that doesn't mean that person values them to the same way or understands them in the same way or even heard them that way that I had said it. So that's just a whole other level that we're not going to get into here. But again, understanding the expectation is key. And what I found is, there's a thing called the DIKW model. I did not come up with it, but it's really how we grow in our understanding of information to where data becomes information, more and more information becomes knowledge, more and more knowledge becomes wisdom. And I love the joke that's always told along with that is, knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is not putting that shit in a fruit salad. So I love that understanding to include that joke because it just gives you that one little twist at the very end for how this goes. So for me, the understanding of these words is hope, assumption, anticipation, expectation that grows along the X and Y axis of either available information or past experience. So the more past experience or information available you have about said topic, something, some event, some person, the greater possibility for you to have a true expectation is. So I'm going to ignore the word hope for just a little bit. But I believe that everything starts as assumption, where you have very little information about it, very little past experience. So I say that assumption is the thought or belief that an act or event will occur based on limited levels of information and or limited levels of past experience. And then that grows. The more information, past experience, we can move hopefully into an anticipation, which is the thought or belief that an act or event will occur based on varying levels of information and or varying levels of past experience, which is great. And then hopefully we can move to the highest level of this type of understanding of how we think anything is going to occur, which is the expectation, which is the thought or belief that an act or event will occur based on credible levels of information and or credible levels of past experience. And the reason I'm so hell-bent on people understanding expectations is because what I've found is that every single one of our emotions is based off of some form of expectation or based on how we think something is going to turn out. If you're happy about something, it exceeded what you thought was going to happen. If you're thrilled about something, it really exceeded, or you didn't think that was going to happen at all, and boom, there it was, and you're absolutely thrilled. The same thing if you're frustrated or furious. Something didn't meet your expectation on some level. And then as a leader, when I realized that my ability to successfully articulate an expectation would have an impact on the mental state or mental well-being of my team, like, holy shit, like I really need to focus on this because this is absolutely crazy. And then people don't really define those terms, and so it was really really tough to kind of put that together. But then going back, I said I would mention hope again, but hope for me is the same definition of assumption, the thought or belief that an act or event will occur based on limited levels of information and or limited levels of past experience, with the added information of or evidence to the contrary. You can have a lot of these. You can assume that something is going to happen. But again, if you have evidence to the contrary, and again, like I really believe that hope is a good thing. Like it's the lowest word on this scale. Limited information, limited past experience. But again, and now evidence to the contrary. If you have let's call it a family member who's been in and out of rehab, you could assume that this one is going to stick, but really you can just hope because you may have a lot of information to the contrary. I could have, this 2025 could be the year of the Cleveland Browns, which is my, beloved football team. My father was born and raised in Cleveland. And so he raised his two sons to be that way. So I'm a huge Browns fan. I'm also from Kansas City, so I'm a huge Chiefs fan. But again, like, do I have an assumption that the Browns are going to win the Super Bowl this year? Probably not, because I have a lot of evidence to the contrary that we aren't going to be there. What about the Chiefs? Do I assume that the Chiefs are going to make it to the Super Bowl? Well, they've been to 3 straight Super Bowls, 4 in the past 5 years. So it's really odd. Like yes, I have a higher expectation of them getting to the Super Bowl, but again, like the Browns, like I have a whole lot of evidence to the contrary, but I don't have that for the Chiefs. So my understanding helps build my mindset and my peace of mind for being able to hedge my bets about what I think is going to happen. And then this whole expectation piece really gets to the root of everything, to where I think we all just as human beings try and get through our day with no surprises, and that's it. Like, traffic in and of itself isn't bad when you're expecting traffic. But when there's an unexpected traffic jam, when you were planning on, hey, the highway should be clear at this time of day, you're absolutely furious because that wasn't your expectation, because you were caught off guard. You were surprised by it. So, mentally, like we just try and hedge our bets every single day. And whether you want to talk about the stock market or sports gambling, this is everyone just hedging their bets and trying to track all the information as much as possible, as much as they can gather, so that there's no surprises, or that people want to get ahead of the power curve of the information so that, again, they can plan accordingly so that there's no surprises, or that they can maximize opportunities for surprises. So that has been crazy. But again, going back to the point that every one of our emotions is based off of an expectation or some form of how we think something is going to happen. So if we're emotionally intelligent, good communicating adults, that all of a sudden we're upset about something, and we can take a step back and say, okay, how much information did I have about this? How much past experience did I have about this? And do I have concrete evidence that shows that I should have expected this to happen to this level? 9 times out of 10, that answer is no. So if we realize, no, it should have only been down here. So whatever that delta is, whatever that difference is, you're like, I was off a bit. We'll talk more about that here in a bit. But that was a really, really, odd thing to kind of figure out and realize was, I could have some positive self-talk, and I can put a lot of this stuff together. And I can understand my emotions more by understanding what that delta is, right? The outcome minus the expectation, times whatever kind of feeling or confidence level I had tied to that. So that's kind of fun. But it's the other part that I realized in studying expectations is it is likely one of the most misunderstood concepts in the entire world. To where, if I ask a room full of leaders, I say, hey, how many of you know how important it is to set solid expectations? Nearly every hand in the room goes up. And I say, okay, cool. How many of you have heard or used the phrase expectation management and believe it to be a good thing? Like, yes, absolutely. Manage expectations. Phenomenal. And then I have the students get in their phones and look up quotes about expectations. And almost without fail, every single one of those quotes is negative. As I had mentioned earlier, Shakespeare says that expectations are the root of all heartache. Ryan Reynolds has some version of, if you have an expectation, you're setting yourself up for failure. Brene Brown, who's probably one of the greatest thought leaders of our time, and a woman whose research has changed my life personally and professionally in so many amazing ways. But even she says that expectations are resentments waiting to happen. So now we're at a crossroads. Right? How do leaders love expectations and the world hates them? Like that is super, super tough. And so that kind of helped put me on this path, because how we just haven't defined the term. Like no one has taught people how to do this. And quite literally, there are dozens of books out there. There's probably half dozen to a dozen TED Talks about expectations, but rarely will you see someone define what an expectation is. And so if you're able to distill this, you're able to work this back, like you can really figure out what is at play to make all of this happen. So let me give you a quick example that I can use to show that, like, how just even thinking or applying a mindset of just thinking about not communication, thinking about expectations can help us communicate better. So let's say that you're going to come out on a business trip to Phoenix, Arizona, where I happen to live, and you're going to reach out. You're like, hey, Chachi, hey, I'm coming to Phoenix, Arizona. I've really got a packed week. I'm leaving midday on Saturday, but I was thinking maybe we go out for dinner and drinks for Friday night. And I'm like, hey, that's awesome. Thank you for reaching out. I love dinner. I love drinks. Would absolutely love to do that. I got to run that by the wife. So I talked to my beautiful wife, Allison, said, hey, baby, hey, this phenomenal person is going to come out and they want to meet up for dinner and drinks on Friday night. Can I go? And she sits there and thinks about it. And she says, what time are you coming home? I'm like, I don't know. Could be a very tame night, could be a very wild night. Who knows? Just kind of want to open it up for everything. Worst case scenario, how about we call it 3 a.m., hour after bars close, whatever. And so my wife thinks about it for a bit and she goes, how about midnight? And I say, okay, you know, for everyone watching or listening out there, if you've ever been in any type of adult relationship whatsoever, you've probably had some measure of that conversation. You want to go out, you talk about the time, but again, you have this conversation. Now we agree on a time. I can go out Friday night. I can have a great time. As long as I'm back by midnight, everything's fine, right? Wrong. Like, absolutely wrong. That was the most bullshit conversation on the planet. We talked about nothing of substance. Absolutely nothing of substance. Number one, midnight is completely arbitrary compared to my behavior because I can stay out till 3, 4 in the morning, driving you around and making sure that everyone's safe and being the designated driver and make sure you get back to your hotel room or whatever. And I show up at home and I'm fine. I'm sober. I'm no worse for the wear, albeit just a little bit tired, but that's absolutely fine. Or then conversely, maybe you wanted to start off with shots, just kind of celebrate a little bit first. All of a sudden, I find myself passed out naked in my front lawn at 10:30 at night. My wife has to come out and get me. She's like, "What happened to you?" I'm like, "I'm home early. It's fine. Like 90 minutes early. I'm a good husband." You know, uh, that would never happen. But that's the insane nature of the misunderstanding of human communication. And then the second part to this is that midnight is a version, some version of a behavior modification mechanism that she's trying to implement, but we never talked about it. She wasn't happy with 3 a.m., but she's okay with midnight. But why? Did she have something going on? Did the family have something going on? Did the kids have something going on? We quite literally discussed none of that and thought that, yeah, you can go out as long as you're back by midnight. Everything's fine. But nothing's fine because you can still screw up that conversation greatly because you weren't talking about the appropriate things. You weren't tracking the appropriate things. And we weren't holding each other accountable to the important stuff that will really have that conversation, like really give it some bite. So now, you just having heard this, you can now say, hey, instead of asking your significant other for permission and go out Friday night, you can just say, hey, listen, hey, this awesome person from the internet is going to be in Phoenix. They've got business all week. They leave out Saturday. They want to know if I go out for dinner and drinks Friday night. I would really like to go. What are our expectations for Friday night and the weekend? I've hardly taught you a thing. You haven't sat through any of my other classes or courseware, but just the little bit that either you knew about expectations before or the little bit that I've been able to kind of distill during this small conversation, that question just changed everything. Because now it's up to both you and your significant other or you or your teammate or whoever the other person may be. It's up to you guys to put all your cards on the table. Hey, this is what's up. This is what we have going on Friday night and the weekend. Let's talk about it. Because maybe through this process, my wife will go, hey, quite honestly, we have nothing going on. Go have a great time. Like, enjoy your night. Come back whenever you come home. Just get home safely. Great. Or maybe we look, she's like, I'm going to have a girls' night too. So maybe you can help me find a babysitter for Friday night. And maybe that's only my only ask. Okay, that makes sense. Or she's like, hey, by all means go out Friday night. Just know that Saturday morning we've got kids' soccer games super early. So as long as you're ready to go for that, that's fine. Another good outcome. Or maybe in going through all this, I can self-assess, be like, oh man, we just got a packed weekend. My wife has a girls' night. Hey, listen, like I would love to go out. I can maybe meet you out for dinner or maybe a drink or two, but then I really have to be home just to make sure she already has some existing plans. All measures of a conversation we would not have otherwise had that we can now have because we understand the expectations. Going through all of this, like the three kind of pictures I want to leave you with is first the Venn diagram. And this Venn diagram is not a life hack, is not a chief code. It's just a graphic representation of, at a bare minimum, three amazing concepts that you can maximize if you understand expectations. Because if you can understand, if you ever heard, read, or watched any stuff by Simon Sinek, you know how amazing he is. He's probably the most effective leadership speaker of the modern time. He's absolutely phenomenal, and his understanding, his golden circle, his start with why concept is absolutely phenomenal. But if you've ever asked yourself why so is so important, it's because we all have expectations. We want to know the why so we can hedge our bets. We don't want to get caught off guard. We want to know, whatever's out there. If one person inside your organization, call them, one of the frontline workers, metaphorically, if they only know about point A and point Z, and they're asked to, draw a conclusion, they're going to draw a straight line between point A and point Z. They didn't jump to a conclusion. That's them taking the available information and making sense out of the nonsensical, which is what the human brain is hardwired to do, flat out. If they don't see that points B through Y are kind of all over the place, if they don't know, number one, that they exist, or number two, where their location is, how could they possibly be expected to connect the dots? So the more you can help them connect the dots, the better off they're going to be. The better they can hedge their bets. And through a leadership lens, the greater the organizational commitment. But it starts with the understanding and then successful articulation of the why. The second part of this is going to be good communication, and everything that entails, whether that's in person, whether that's over email, text message, video teleconference, and any of that stuff. Understanding the concepts of being a good communicator is huge. And then thirdly, high levels of emotional intelligence, for how we understand human beings, how we understand people, how we understand how people are going to like or dislike each other, how people are beautifully different, in their own ways. And there's a weird kind of internal war going on about DEI and stuff. But, at face value, I think we've had a lot of great growth and understanding of the different cultures and the different peoples out there. And again, not to kind of discount any of that growth and evolution of that understanding, but realistically, every single human being in the world is the smallest minority, because no one is just like them. No one has their experience. No one has any of their things that make them uniquely and beautifully you. And as a leader, if you can see that about yourself first, if you can understand how beautifully and wonderfully unique you are as a human being, then maybe, just maybe, that will give you some semblance of an understanding of how beautifully unique everybody else in the world is, and what an absolute amazing challenge it is to lead a team full of all those unique individuals towards a common goal. But the cool part about understanding and communicating expectations is it can draw all three of those things together. And all three is absolutely huge, because with all three, the understanding of why, good communication, and high emotional intelligence gets you to that fundamental understanding of expectations, and then hopefully the successful communication outward of those expectations. Like if you can understand the why and be a good communicator, that gives you clarity as far as that goes. If you can understand the why and high emotional intelligence, then that gives you great alignment with what you need to do. And then if you have good communication and high emotional intelligence, that's going to build a connection. But if you understand and can communicate through the lens of expectations, you can take that clarity, you can take that alignment, you can take that connection, build it together, and that expectation is going to help the mental well-being of your team. It is going to increase connection. It is going to decrease frustration. All too often, we hold people accountable for information that we never gave them. Right. So this is our opportunity to be better. And then lastly, the scale and understanding of expectations as an emotion has both a positive and negative side to that, as I alluded to it earlier. Most people really think about expectations in the negative context, but there's a good positive side. And in the quad chart you're going to see here, hopefully this is somewhat intuitive, but it hopefully helps you understand the concepts of what is good versus great. Because if you have low confidence that something's going to happen and you're off by a little bit, right, it still didn't meet that, you're probably not worried about it. If you're high confidence and there's a small gap, like, okay, we're almost there, right? But all of a sudden, if you have a low confidence thing and a large gap, you're like, wow, we missed that significantly. Like, what? I wonder what was going on. That is weird. Or like, the high confidence large gap. He's like, what a surprise! Like high confidence that nothing was going to happen, and then something happened. Like, Wow, that is absolutely amazing. My wife shows up one day with chicken wings and steak. Like, I was not expecting that. That was huge, and I'm absolutely thrilled. The negative side of thing, I think, also helps our emotional intelligence to help pick apart what is frustrating us and what is making this bad at that point in time. So again, as you see on the screen here, if you have low confidence in something's going to happen, it's a small miss, it's no big deal. You're like, okay, that's fine. If you have high confidence that something's going to happen and there's a small gap, you're like, okay, we're kind of there. The miss is probably irrelevant, but we can kind of tighten up our shot group just a little bit. On the other hand, low confidence that something's going to happen and it's a large gap. Like, wow, again, that's unfortunate. It's not hurting us right now, but we should probably dive into this because this could eventually end up hurting us if we build our confidence moving forward for this to happen, which then leads us to that bottom right quadrant, to where you have high confidence of something is going to happen, and now you have a large gap, and you're like, WTF, man, how did we miss this? What went wrong? And now you're significantly torqued. So from absolutely thrilled to furious and everything in between is our understanding of expectations and different people's expectations and the world's communication. Yeah, the world's ability to have expectations, to communicate expectations is a little bit limited, and we need to do better. So this is a process that is going to take continual improvement and involvement. And if you've stuck around this long, number one, thank you. Number two, I hope you got something out of this. Number three, I hope you're really challenging this. I would love for you to push back or kind of question everything that I presented here. Or then lastly, I hope you stay tuned, because hopefully I can capture some of my science, my research, my evolution into this doctoral program, that hopefully a few years from now, I'm Doc Chachi. We can kind of figure this out. And hopefully I will have formalized what I hope to become Pacheco's theory of expectations. And then we'll move forward, and then we'll see kind of what happens. But thank you for staying here, and we'll catch you next time on the Cape Lead Revolution. And this is Chachi reminding you to always educate, anticipate, and dominate. We'll talk soon.